Listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to True Crime, the podcast that helps you find new, emerging, and undiscovered true crime podcasts. I'm Greg, the host and curator of True Crime. Today's episode is from Love and Murder. Love and Murder is a weekly true crime podcast talking about relationships that turned into murder. If you like today's episode, make sure to check out the episode description for links to subscribe. All right, let's get this show started.
Begin.
Ambulance service. Is the patient breathing?
Barely.
Okay, is he breathing right now, though, even if he's...
Is he breathing, Tom? He keeps taking big dark breaths. Basically, my 6-year-old stepson is falling, he's banged his head.
Okay.
And while he was on the floor, he's banged his head another 5 times.
Okay.
He's lost colour, he's got a big lump on his head.
Is he awake?
So what, sorry?
Is he awake?
He's half in and out, but he's banged his head quite hard.
Is his breathing noisy or abnormal?
Is it noisy or abnormal? It's barely there, he's barely breathing, he's in and out, he's taking it hard.
Okay.
He's basically been treating us all like shit. He's threw himself on the floor, he's headbutting the floor. I'm trying to pick him up in the process, he's headbutting me in the process.
Okay.
I've got him up, he was breathing like a little bit better at first.
Yeah.
Washed him down, put some water down him, tried to obviously get him like, a bit more colour in him, but then obviously I've seen the lump on his head that he's done to himself.
Right. Help's been arranged for him. Okay.
Yeah.
Try and keep calm for me. Can you get him lay out flat on his back?
Flat on his back.
How old is he?
He's 6, nearly 7.
6 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, there with me.
He's losing, he's very pale, but obviously it's a big bang. He's knocked himself out by the look of him.
And he's barely breathing now.
He's breathing, he's barely breathing, he's lifeless at the minute.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you how to give basic life support, okay? So you can just keep going.
Hello, everyone. Hello. I know this episode is late. I did have contractors here at the house, so there was literally no quiet place for me to record, but better late than never. Here we go. Welcome to a new episode of Love and Murder, the weekly true crime podcast discussing relationships gone terribly wrong, where our motto is, you're either someone's last love or their first murder. I am your host, Kai, and our show discusses true crime cases told in the form of a story with mystery and suspense. In today's episode, we're talking about a case of a once promising young woman who hit rock bottom after losing everything to alcohol addiction. From killing her partner to losing her own son, this is the story of Olivia Labinjo-Halcrow. But it's not as simple as you think. Join us for a twisted tale of love and murder. But first, I wanted to remind you to head on over to our exclusive group at patreon.com/love and murder. Our next bonus episode is the case of Charles Starkweather, who's a serial killer who author Stephen King was inspired by. You don't want to miss it. www.patreon.com/love and murder. And we'll discuss more about our Patreon at the end of the show. In the meantime, let's get into today's case. The daughter of Peter and Madeline Halcrow, whose name is Olivia Labinjo-Halcrow, was born in the UK in 1993. Her mother, Madeline, was a retired nurse who had a successful career managing 2 cardiac catheter labs and worked at coronary care and day case unit. Olivia had always been a bright and intelligent student. She served her time in the British Army's volunteer unit called the Territorial Army, which serves about 1/3 of the British Army. It's more like a militia that was formed during war times, and the volunteers typically have full-time careers. They are trained and called upon during emergencies. So like in the United States, you would refer to that as the National Guard or the reserves. So we have the same thing here. Olivia was a lance corporal for the TA, and she enrolled in the University of Nottingham and pursued economics, politics, and philosophy. So you could tell she really had plans for her life. This is when she met Thomas Hughes on Facebook. The two dated for some time, and because of her pregnancy, so she got pregnant from Thomas, she decided to put her career plans and everything on hold. And she was actually in the last year of university when she found this out. The two moved to the West Midlands to raise the baby. But it would be unfair to say that that was the only reason she dropped out of school. Olivia was actually struggling with mental health issues and had become addicted to drugs with a huge dependency on alcohol. As the once promising young girl's life began to crumble, Thomas stood by her side and just was a beacon of support for her. Now, I wonder if she was drinking and doing drugs while pregnant. Eesh, I hope not. As time went on, Olivia's alcohol use got worse and her mental health deteriorated. She spiraled and found herself in AA. At least she went for help. There she met a man named Gary Cunningham, a delivery driver who had the same alcohol addiction as her. And, I mean, you have a loving, supportive guy with you who is the father of your child. You go to AA, you find somebody who has the same addiction as you. So what's the most logical thing to do? That's right. She started a sexual relationship with him and cheated on Thomas. Ugh. On January 4th, 2014, she gave birth to Arthur Labinjo-Hughes. She called him the light of her life, which children are. Although Olivia was still struggling with alcohol addiction, she really tried to be a great mother, and it was told that, she loved Arthur and she was a doting mother on him. Arthur was a typically pleasant child and was increasingly attached to his grandmother, Madeline Halcrow. She called him her, quote, sunny delight because he was such an infectiously happy, sweet baby. He loved superheroes and football and had a great sense of humor. His wonderful smile, they said, would just light up a room. Sadly, Arthur saw a lot of violence. His parents' fights would almost always get physical, and Olivia's addiction seemed to get the better of her. On one occasion, he hid under the covers for almost an hour while his parents fought. When Arthur was a year old, Thomas found out that Olivia was cheating on him, which led to a huge fight and ultimately the end of their relationship. Court granted shared custody to both parents as Olivia and Arthur relocated to Birmingham and settled in an apartment on Frensham Way, I think that's how it's said, which is in Harborne, along with Gary. Gary had a child from a previous relationship that didn't live with him. So that took me for a loop. So they moved with Gary? Anyways, that's okay. So I guess she already had herself a man. In 2013, he faced charges of battery against the mother of his child, which I guess is the best person to move in with, which prompted him to change his life and join AA groups. Gary and Olivia's relationships was volatile. Shocker! The good times were great and the bad times were horrible. Olivia's father, Peter, became increasingly concerned as he saw the downfall of this new relationship. It seemed like they were both headed down a destructive path. Similarly, Gary's sister, Katie Brown, was worried about her brother. He seemed withdrawn, and it wasn't really the funny and outgoing brother that she knew. Now, in the very beginning of the relationship, Gary once called Olivia from Katie's phone, which she ended up missing the call. Olivia called back and heard Katie's voice, and that just set her off. She didn't even try and listen to what Katie had to say. She just heard a voice. Katie quickly realized that someone so possessive at such an early stage in the relationship could be potentially problematic. As time went by, she felt Olivia grew more and more dominant. Her temper, mixed with alcohol, and Gary's booze-driven outbursts were all equally out of control. It was just too much. One day, Olivia found out she was pregnant with Gary's child, but she decided that before he found out, she was going to go get an abortion. So that's what she did. Maybe she felt like she wasn't in a good space for children. Maybe she felt that, their relationship was too volatile to bring a child in there. I don't know. But she decided to go get an abortion. Katie would notice bruises on Gary's legs and would ask him about it. And he would often laugh it off and say, just rough sex. You know how it is. But then the scratches on his face and arms looked really bad. And the only reason his sister didn't do anything about it is because she knew that the whole relationship was very volatile, that Gary was also violent towards Olivia. So I don't know. I guess she figured either one of two things, tit for tat, or if she told on her brother, then Olivia would tell on him and he can go to jail. So maybe these were the thought processes. And whenever he had scratches on his face, Katie would always start her conversation with him saying, quote, "You better not be hitting her." And Gary would always be like, "I was just defending myself." And then in November 2018, She almost reported them when Gary showed up to her house in the dead of the night, the middle of the night, and he was bleeding from a stab wound in the arm. Can you imagine that? Like your brother just shows up at your house bleeding crazily from a stab wound? So she told him to report it, and he said, quote, "Well, I'm never going back there, Katie." But we all know he went back. Then another incident happened, this time in front of Gary's mom, where he swore to Olivia and she sprayed him in the face with an aerosol deodorant, yelling at him, screaming at him not to speak to her again. So it just continued and continued and continued. One would say, "I'm never doing this again." One would say, "I'm never coming back." And it just didn't stop. They kept coming back. They kept repeating the same patterns. It was just continuous, continuous, continuous. And just like I said, patterns. The breaking point of their relationship came when Gary found out that Olivia was cheating on him with another man, which that's how he got her. So it's not really a surprise to me. So they broke up that November and he moved on to start dating somebody else. And Katie was like, cool. It didn't like really affect her. She was like, all right, go, have fun. Happy for you. And then the following February, they got back together. On February 23rd, 2019, a delivery driver was walking into the Freshman Way apartments when he noticed a huge pool of blood. As he came closer, he saw a limp body propped up against a fire exit of one of the apartments. The injured man was unconscious, and so the delivery driver quickly called for an ambulance. Gary had been stabbed multiple times in the calf, and he was losing blood from an artery. Man, an artery is like the worst, one of the worst places, obviously, to be stabbed or cut or whatever. By the time the police and ambulances arrived, it was too late. At 29 years old, Gary was dead. You bleed out very quickly when an artery is punctured. Police knocked on doors trying to gather as much information as they could. Someone had heard a man shouting in the hallway and then silence, so they didn't think much of it. Because you hear that stuff all the time. Somebody yelling, people fighting, and then, they move on or they just stop fighting. It's nothing that you think of. Now, if you heard fighting, and then bam, then you might be like, oh my God, what happened? When officers found Olivia, she appeared dazed and even stepped over Gary's body at one point in time and really didn't show any emotion. And she did tell them that her boyfriend had been unstable and he was planning on killing himself. He kept telling her that he would kill himself, and she thinks he finally did it. Now, cops were like, tell us more, because even though she says he was suicidal, the wounds were clearly not self-inflicted. Olivia insisted to them that he was not in the right state of mind for a long time. And he just kept talking about ending his life, ending things and everything like that. And so she believed that this is what happened. Now, if you spoke to his family, they were shocked. They couldn't comprehend that he was dead. I don't even want to say he had killed himself, but he was dead. They'd never heard him being suicidal. They'd never heard any of that. Katie, though, his sister, remember, almost seems like she expected it. When Katie found out, her first question was whether Gary's death was in fact a suicide, or was Olivia responsible for it. Investigators and eyewitnesses ultimately uncovered the truth. Gary and Olivia had been fighting, and Olivia had stabbed him once in the chest and then in the calf. And it was the 11 centimeter deep cut in his calf that had taken his life. Police recovered a pink-handled kitchen knife from the apartment, and it had Gary's blood all over it. This entire altercation took place while 5-year-old Arthur was in the apartment. The little boy was so afraid, and he had no idea what was going on or why police were taking away his mother. Olivia then claimed that she had no memory of the attack. Now, isn't that kind of how Dexter started? His mom got murdered in front of him. Are you people serious? Arthur developed serious anxiety issues after this because he was afraid of losing his father just like he lost his mother. In February 2019, he started school. Now, we all know that, your first day of school, your first ever day of school in itself can be riddled with anxiety for the child, with you too as a parent, but for the child. But imagine already having anxiety from this and then going into another anxiety riddled situation. In July 2019, a doctor diagnosed a 5-year-old with anxiety. So now he's clinically diagnosed with anxiety, and it's not like he was born with this. This came from a very traumatic situation. In the meantime, Thomas met 32-year-old Emma Tustin on a dating website called Plenty of Fish. Y'all know Plenty of Fish. Anyway, obviously having a child was a little problematic when it came to a new relationship. But, people make it work. It is what it is, Plus, Emma had 4 kids of her own. So now it's the Brady Bunch. Well, half of the Brady Bunch. Quarter of them? I don't know. However, the kids had been taken away from Emma following a failed suicide attempt in 2013 when Emma jumped off of a 6-story garage, breaking multiple bones. What? She was deemed mentally unstable to look after a child. So the state or the country or the county, I don't know how y'all do it in England, took her children away. 2 of her children were sent to live with their fathers. But Emma never told Thomas any of this. Thomas had no idea about her mental state. I believe he knew about the kids, but I don't think she told him the real reason that the kids weren't with her. When Thomas finally introduced her to his son, they met at a park and they all played cricket together. Now, I don't understand cricket at all. My mom used to play it and she understands it, but I don't understand cricket. In America, we don't play cricket at all. Or in the United States, we don't play cricket at all. So I know it's a flat bat and you hit a ball on the ground and the ball goes between some things. I don't know what the goal is. I don't know how to tell who won. If anybody wants to explain cricket, our UK listeners, please leave a comment. Feel free. Let me understand the game because I don't understand it. Anyway, so they played cricket. They had wonderful fun. And on the inside, Emma actually felt uncomfortable with Arthur. She felt like he didn't like her and that Thomas couldn't be all hers until Arthur was out of the picture. She also was scared that Thomas would go back to Olivia because of Arthur. Now, although Arthur had anxiety, he was actually growing a personality and learning to work with his anxiety. And he was known as a kid who loved joking around. He had a favorite book. He loved playing. And when he had met Emma, his teachers kind of became concerned, like maybe it was too much of a change. And also another reason why he was actually getting better is because Thomas had told Arthur that his mother had joined the army and she was off, training and playing war games and stuff like that. But then someone from his school had told him that his mom was in prison. You know how kids are. No, your dad's lying. Your mom's in jail. She killed somebody. And you're like, nuh-uh, my mom's in the military. So when Thomas spoke to social services, they told him to avoid mistrust and confusion and tell Arthur the truth. So when Thomas sat him down and gently told him the truth about where his mom was, Arthur's behavior began to change at school and at home. He started, quote, acting up more. And you know how kids are. They really can't express their emotions. So it comes out in being naughty, acting up a lot, stuff like that. And some parents just don't understand and they just figure, you need to just listen instead of trying to figure out what the issue is. So basically his mom, he just finds out his mom's in prison. His dad's been lying to him. His mom is a murderer. So, how is he supposed to process that? And speaking of his mom being in prison, Olivia had claimed that she had been physically assaulted and even raped by Gary. And she said she had stabbed him in self-defense. But, dismissing her claims, she was sentenced on September 10th, 2019 in the Crown Court of Birmingham and found guilty of manslaughter. So she basically went in there and said, "Not guilty." And they said, "Yeah, whatever, guilty." And because they did actually give her leniency because of alcohol-related mental health issues, she was only given 18 years behind bars. And Thomas, of course, had been given full custody of Arthur. Now, with Arthur, he was very close to his uncle, Blake Hughes, and he talked to his uncle about everything. And Blake became a bit concerned when Arthur complained to him that Thomas was becoming too strict at home. But it really came to a head when Arthur had told his uncle that his dad had called him ugly and pushed his head into a wall. Has the child not been through enough? I'm just wondering. I'm asking for a friend. And there was also a time, Arthur is telling his uncle, when his dad had gotten him a sandwich, and Emma then proceeded to throw a hissy fit about how it was an unnecessary treat, a waste of money. You know, we got food at home. Like, come on. By October, everyone noticed that Arthur barely smiled and just wasn't the same bright-minded, bright-acting, happy-go-lucky boy they'd met in February. So even though he was traumatized in February, because remember, his mom, all this stuff happened. He saw all this stuff going on with his mom and with Gary. And then he went to his dad, and then he started school. So even with all of that and his diagnosed anxiety and triple anxiety because he was going to school, he was still happier then in February than he was in October. Can you imagine that? By this time, Emma began to spend the weekends at Thomas's house, and they frequently spent Tuesdays together. Actually, they spent every Tuesday night together, and they usually went to a place called Wacky Warehouse on Wednesdays with Arthur and Emma's two youngest children. But in October, Thomas told his mom that Arthur wasn't okay with Emma. He was very rude to her. At school, Arthur suddenly became not even like we notice he's acting weird. He just turned into a completely different child. And what happened that, the school obviously didn't know about is that Thomas had forbidden Arthur from seeing Olivia's mother. So his grandmother, one of the few people he loved and looked up to. So he had his uncle, he had this grandmother, and now you're telling him he can't see her anymore. And it never came out why this happened. To this day, Madeline, the grandmother, doesn't know why. On October 21st, which was Madeline's birthday, Arthur was allowed to go spend a day with her. And he had a great time. He was actually happy. But when Thomas came to pick him up, Madeline said that Arthur grew visibly upset. He asked his father, "Is she in the car?" When Thomas said yes, and I guess she, as in Emma. And like I said, when Thomas said yes, Arthur started crying really, really hard. And he turned and asked his grandmother if he could stay with her. She said, "No, baby, you have to go home with your father, but you can come visit grandmom next week." And, he settled down a bit after that, and they took him home. Then 2 days later, on October 23rd, Thomas texted the grandmother saying, "You know what, that's it. You really, really, really can't see Arthur anymore. And also, I won't be bringing over Olivia's letters for you to read either." In November 2019, Thomas told the school that he felt his son needed help and that, like I said before, he was behaving differently. Him and his mother went to go meet the teachers to discuss Arthur's behavior and what can be done about it. The teachers explained to Thomas that Arthur was afraid of Thomas abandoning him, kind of like he felt his mother had, like he would be taken away and, that's a form of abandonment. The other thing Arthur had expressed to teachers was that he was afraid that his dad might kill him. And they noticed that Arthur was a little bit too obsessed with guns, murder, death, Basically things that a child should not be exposed to. And this sounds like the beginning of Dexter. So a referral was made for mental health support, but that's all that happened. There was just a referral and nobody followed up on it. Meanwhile, even though Madeline was completely now barred from seeing Arthur, she still would leave presents on the porch for him, hoping that he would find them. Not only couldn't his grandmother speak with him, but his mother wasn't allowed to talk to him either. So while all this is going on, Olivia was appealing to the courts to be able to contact Arthur. And basically, because she couldn't get a hold of anyone and, they're not allowing her to talk to him and his mother's not allowed to talk to him, that side of the family was basically unaware of what was going on with Arthur. In December, Arthur had a huge outburst at school when, during a school play, a baby was taken out of its crib and the baby started crying from his mother. So I guess that was a trigger for Arthur. So amongst all this going on with his son, Thomas told his mom, kids will be kids. I'm not going to go into that. But anyway, Mom, I'm moving in with Emma. And his mother said, that's not a good idea. I don't think you should. And he said, yeah, well, and he moved in with her anyway. On January 1st, actually, 2020, Thomas had a huge fight with his father, Chris Hughes. His father was not okay with the way that Arthur was being treated at home. And he was also not okay that Thomas had hit Arthur for being, quote, too rude to Emma. His punishments were also very severe. He was punished in the hallway, face to the wall, and made to stand in a corner. But, some people do that. But how long do you make your kid stand in the corner? Because he was made to stand in the corner for hours. And so when his father's telling him this, like, I can't believe you're doing this to this boy, blah, blah, blah. Thomas said, I'm not. He's lying. It's all lies. Who are you going to believe, me or him? And this led to a huge rift in the family. So instead of people coming in and, just really seeing what's going on or talking to the little boy and possibly getting the little boy out of the house, they were just like, well, we'll never talk to you again. Later on, the family found out on Facebook, because that's the best place to find out, that Arthur had proposed to Emma. Everybody was pissed. So not only can Arthur see his grandmother, he now wasn't allowed to see his grandmother on his dad's side either. Or now his favorite Uncle Blake. So they're just like taking everybody and everyone away from this boy. And he just became increasingly lonely. In January 2020, 2 days after Arthur's 6th birthday, Thomas took him to a doctor complaining that he was being too clingy and played a little too much with stuffed toys. The doctor was like, yeah, sounds like a kid to me. On March 4th, Arthur broke down in tears at school, telling his teachers that his dad took away his favorite teddy bear. The teacher spoke to his father and seriously advised him not to discipline him this way, as it was damaging his personality and he was too young for everything that was going on. Arthur was celebrating what some call Mother's Day on March 22nd. Don't come for me. Every day is Mother's Day to me. And offered to fix Emma breakfast. But she refused, saying his behavior was too untowardly because he ripped up her card and photograph. He tried to apologize to her, but she wouldn't accept his apology, and he also tried to explain to them how much he missed his mom. But again, they wouldn't listen. The very next day, the first lockdown was announced in the UK. Oh, the worst place for him to be. So, this is COVID time. Everybody's on lockdown. Now he's in a house stuck with people he doesn't like and who are putting him in crazy disciplinary situations and who aren't listening to him and who really don't care what's going on with him. So basically, because of the lockdown, Arthur and Thomas moved into Emma's home in Solihull to be together, and that's where they were going to hunker down. Things got worse for Arthur. One day his father cut up his favorite football. They would get into constant fights. He would do all kind of things to punish him. On April 14th, Arthur and Emma's son got into a fight, which escalated to the point that Shane Hawkins, Emma's ex, got involved. After the physical altercation, Thomas took Arthur to his mom's house, Joanna, Thomas's mom, and the two spent the night over there. This is the first time that Arthur got a chance to talk to his Uncle Blake since he was banned from doing it. And he told him that Emma often grabbed his head and banged it against a wall, and she would call him an ugly, horrible brat, and just all kind of stuff. So once he was going for a shower, and Joanna, his grandmother, was helping him change his clothes when she saw that Arthur's body was covered in bruises. And she tried to convince Thomas not to go back to Emma. Like, your son is in pain. Your son needs you. Don't go back to Emma. Well, Thomas was like, well, I apologize to Emma for everything that happened between her son and Arthur, and we're going back to her house. So when they were trying to leave on the 16th, Joanna tried to convince Thomas to let Arthur stay with her for a bit, but Thomas said, no, he needs to come with me. On April 16th, Madeline received a call from Joanna, so both grandmothers. So Olivia's mother got a call from Thomas's mother asking if they could meet up. So being that they literally don't talk, not that they hated each other or anything, they just don't talk. Madeline found this alarming and unusual, and she decided to go find out what this was about. Now, Thomas's mom and dad actually told her that Arthur was being beaten and she had seen the bruises to prove it. She then pulled up pictures of the bruising to show Madeline. Madeline, who was a nurse, immediately knew this was not anything dealing with an accident. They were faded bruises, new bruises on top of bruises, new bruises on top of that. And Madeline also told them that you can see by the markings here that this came from an adult-sized hand. So she immediately called social services. The Solihull Council sent out Jane Kavanaugh to meet with them in a prearranged meeting for April 17th, which is, why did you prearrange it? If somebody's saying they hurt their child, like I witnessed it, I have proof and everything like that, why would then you tell the parents that, hey, I'm sending somebody over in like a week? That's insane. They should have just popped up and been, surprise, Sorry. When Jane asked them about the bruises, she was shown a single faint bruise on his back that the couple claimed that Arthur got from play fighting with Emma's son. She said they used boxing gloves, but I don't know. He would have had to hit him pretty damn hard for there to be a bruise left. So the social worker was like, okay, well, parents are very truthful. Next question, let's ask the kids. And she asked Emma's son and Arthur how safe they felt in the home, with 0 being to the floor and 10 being to the ceiling. And they both enthusiastically pointed at the ceiling. Yeah, probably because they had threatened that little boy that if you don't point at the ceiling, I'll tell you what you... Or they made him scared that, oh, they're going to take you away from us and you'll never see your father again or something. You know what I'm saying? This is why you do not mention when you're coming. It's just a pop-up. So the social worker looked around, noticed that the house was clean. There was food in the fridge. The children seemed happy. And she was like, well, nothing to see here. I just see 2 upstanding adults that we just told we were coming, even though there was a accusation of abuse and pictures of bruises. But, everything's good. I'm pretty sure they didn't try and, not hit this little boy for a couple days so the bruises were healed. I'm pretty sure they didn't try and clean the house quickly. And I'm pretty sure they didn't just fill up the fridge. These children are in good hands. Before she left, she did offer help, like a program for Arthur to come to terms with all the violence that he had seen growing up. But Thomas was like, no, he's okay. The next day, Arthur's uncle spoke with the West Midlands Police Department on a web chat to report the bruises and even sent pictures to an officer. Officers were like, this could be photoshopped. It's COVID. I mean, better safe than sorry, right? and they did not follow up with this. They never called back, never investigated. They were just like, open and shut case, Johnson. And they were basically like, social services went out there already, so why are you calling us? And they told him that, hey, don't forget that you have a restraining order, so if you go to the house, we're going to arrest you. So have a nice day, click. Joanna, the grandmother, wasn't going to take that for an answer. And on April 20th, which was 2 days after this, she called a school insisting that they get social services involved in this matter, or at least investigate what was going on. Again, social services assured the school that, no, we went to the house. I mean, one visit is enough, right? Like, we would have found anything if anything was going on. So we're good, and he's good, and I don't know why they keep calling. Meanwhile, at home, Emma would put too much salt in Arthur's food as, quote, punishment to discipline him if she felt he was being too rowdy or if he didn't finish his food or anything. He would be hit, cursed at, yelled at, and like I said, made to stand in place for hours. Emma's stepfather, John Dutton, witnessed this, and he actually made an anonymous phone call to social services in May 2020, reporting to them that this little boy is in danger. And social services did absolutely nothing. The school offered to take Arthur, just in case they figured his dad was having a hard time finding a place to live, or, we'll take Arthur to keep him safe. And until you can get your bearings or whatever, we'll keep him here. Thomas said, no, that's okay. We're not in any trouble. My son needs to stay with me and he's fine where he is. All this time, Olivia has no idea of what's going on with her son. Nobody's telling her, nobody's contacting her. She's still trying to get permission to speak with him, but, she's in jail and nobody's really listening to her. When the UK's lockdown finally was lifted on June 8th, 2020, all the kids returned to school, but Arthur didn't return. When they asked Thomas where he was, Thomas said, well, Arthur has a headache and he'll come the next day. Then the next day, oh no, he's kind of sick, so he'll come the next day. Then the next day, oh no, during the pandemic, he lost too much weight and I think he'll pass out from weakness. He'll come the next day. Well, a week passed, and on June 15th, Emma took Arthur with her to get her hair done. And because it's COVID, she actually went to her hairdresser's house. And her hairdresser, Catherine Milhench, I think that's how you say the name, was surprised to see how frail and just Arthur was. And he was so quiet. And she mentioned that while he was standing up, he actually had a hard time standing up. She could see his little legs trembling. And Emma just came in like nothing was wrong. Everything's okay. And she told him to face the door and just wait. And the child stood like that for 6 hours. Just basically imagine a skeletal child standing facing the door for 6 hours, shaking like a leaf. I gotta tell you, as a hairdresser, you out your freaking mind if you think I'm gonna have your child standing there for 6 hours, looking all skinny and stuff like that. You could tell when a child is just, you're naturally small, as opposed to a child who's being starved. And you gonna have to fight me, because I'm not gonna have any child stand there for 6 hours. If he did something horrible, you need to find a different punishment, at least while you're in my house, because I'm not having a child stand and face a wall for 6 hours. Fight me, and you'll have a problem, because I'm gonna protect your child. I'm not doing your hair. Okay, I'm calm now. On June 16th, the next day, they came back to finish Emma's hair. And I'm just not understanding the hairdresser, but whatever. When they came back, Thomas and Emma were shouting at the boy, and the hairdresser was just really surprised at this behavior. She said that they were shouting at him like, quote, like a game of tennis, just back and forth, back and forth. Mind you, don't forget, this little boy is only 6 years old. And she said the shouting was like they were berating him. Mother, stepmother, mother, father, stepmother, just back and forth, back and forth. And while they were yelling, the hairdresser's partner tried to sneak the little boy a glass of water so that Thomas and Emma wouldn't see, and the boy was too afraid to take it. And the hairdresser said that Thomas seemed to handle Arthur with just a hatred, like, ugh. He would hold him by the scruff of the neck, throw him here, throw him there, and just telling people, well, it's because he's acting out, so I have to be tough with him. So I guess she got her hair done. Again, wouldn't be me, but whatever. She got her hair done. They went home. When they went home, Thomas left to do some errands. And then Emma texted him around 2:30 p.m. saying that Arthur had knocked himself out by banging his head on the floor. Thomas, I'm sure, rushed home. And when he got home, they called 999, which is, in the U.S. is 911, around 2:42 p.m. And if you go to our Patreon, www.patreon.com/loveandmurder, part of the incentive of being a lovely lamb over there, an exclusive lamb, is you'll get all videos and pictures and stuff like this. So we're going to have the body cam footage of what police found when they came to the house. So when police got there, Emma was crying and saying Arthur had hit her and that he had banged his head on the floor a few times. And she had been just trying her best, but the boy hated her so much. You don't understand what it's like to be a stepmother. He just wanted his mom, and no matter what she did, he just didn't like her. And she was so concerned about him. So when she ran to prevent him from hurting himself, he headbutted her and he kicked her and he hit her, and she just couldn't stop him. So paramedics were called, and as they're looking at this unconscious boy, they're looking him over, they're like, we got to take him to the hospital. So they took him to the Birmingham Children's Hospital, where doctors started looking him over, and they were shocked to find over 137 bruises on his 6-year-old little tiny skeletal framed body. He suffered severe head trauma and possible brain injury. The doctors reported his injuries to police, which resulted in the arrest of Emma and Thomas on suspicion of causing harm to Arthur. I mean, there were only 185,000 phone calls to social services and the police, but I guess now they have suspicion of causing harm to Arthur. Authorities called his grandmother, Madeline, who after over 7 months, was finally able to see her grandson, who was currently hooked up to machines in the ICU. I don't even want to continue. I almost feel like crying. Not almost, I do feel like crying. I don't even want to say this sentence. So that night, on June 17th at 1 a.m., doctors announced that Arthur could not be saved. And his life support machine was switched off. So basically, this sweet little 6-year-old boy had been beaten to death. They finally told his mother, Olivia, what happened. And of course, she was devastated. Emma and Thomas stood trial at Coventry Crown Court. And police suddenly uncovered a huge amount of evidence in the form of WhatsApp messages and videos. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm so sorry. Anyway, I'm sorry. The couple had installed a camera in the living room to keep an eye on Arthur, supposedly what they said. And in the video, he was seen wearing the same dirty onesie, a freaking onesie for a 6-year-old that he had been dressed in on Friday when they came and got him and that he died in. WhatsApp messages included Emma's inability to cope with the stress of all the kids. So I don't even have anything to say. Well, when Emma was complaining to Thomas about, how much this stressed her out, he would reply with stuff like, quote, take his jaw off, or, quote, end him. That's his father. There were also WhatsApp audios where Arthur was screaming and crying as Emma reported him for, being naughty. Emma recorded over 200 voice notes, basically showing that, listen to him screaming, listen to him acting out. I can't take this, da, 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 da. And his father would just reply with, quote, I'll go to town on him, or, quote, put him outside with the rubbish. Like, why didn't you just let his grandparents, it doesn't matter who, your mom, her mom, the school, if you didn't want him so bad, why didn't you just let somebody else take him? That was the obvious answer. Give him to his grandparents who were begging for him. Give him to his uncle. The school was begging for him. Why keep him there? You didn't want him. Speaking of which, there are voice notes with Emma repeatedly asking Thomas to leave Arthur at his grandmother's house. Of course, during the investigation, it came out that when the social worker went to visit the house on April 18th, Arthur and his stepbrother had been told to lie to her about how happy they were. And Arthur was threatened that remember I said that's probably what they did. He was threatened that he'd be taken away from them if, he said anything to the social worker. Remember I said that? So they had actually given Arthur some pool time that day. And for a little boy who gets no fun, he was so happy. And probably they told him, this is how it's going to be from now on. We love you. We're sorry about everything. And so, of course, it was easy for him to just lie to them. It also came out that, throughout all this time, they would curse at him. They would call him, they say, devil child. They would call him Hitler. They would call him evil, and just like all kind of stuff. And in one of the recordings, you could hear Arthur actually in the background saying, quote, Daddy's going to throw me out the window. It was also revealed that Arthur was taken out of his bedroom upstairs and was put to sleep downstairs in the living room on the living room floor, while Emma's son and daughter had their beds upstairs. And when they spent the nights away from the house, the son and daughter, they didn't bring Arthur upstairs. He still had to sleep downstairs on the cold living room floor. In the recordings, you can also hear Arthur calling for his grandmother and his Uncle Blake. And in a heart-wrenching recording of Arthur, he had woken up on the day he died at 8:30 a.m., too weak to stand up, and said, no one loves me. That's what he woke up and said. And he woke up again and he called out, not knowing if his Uncle Blake was there or not, but he called out, Blake, no one loves me. Nobody's going to feed me, over and over again. And if you want to hear this gut-wrenching, you can go to our Patreon. So Arthur had passed away from brain injuries, being that his head was banged against the floor, and he had also been shaken vigorously. Is that how she was claiming to stop him from hurting himself? Emma was convicted of manslaughter in December 2021 and given a life sentence with a minimum of 29 years. Thomas was only sentenced to 21 years in prison. On July 29th, that sentence was increased to 24 years because it appeared to be lenient. Really? Increasing it 3 more years showed less lenience? Okay. After Arthur's death, Olivia appeared in court for an early release. She told them that she was helpless behind bars, that she couldn't help her son, and she couldn't face his killers because she was in jail. She wanted to face them, look them in the eye, and tell them how they had taken away the light of her life. In a tribute to Arthur, she said she wanted to focus on Arthur's life and celebrate the beautiful little boy. So although she made that heartfelt plea and tried to get her sentence reduced, she was simply given 11 years behind bar. Some people argue that her sentencing has been harsh, like harsher than normal because she was a woman, because their thing is men who have been accused of manslaughter have been given 5 to 8 years in jail on average. Arthur's cousin, Bernie Dixon, set up an organization in his memory to help abused children. During a soccer or football match in 2022, Birmingham and Cardiff City stopped their play in the 6 minutes to honor little Arthur, and fans sang for him. Officer Jess Davies of the Midlands Police is set to run a half marathon on May 7th, 2023 in memory of Arthur and for his organization. A mother herself, she says there have been way too many preventable cases of domestic-related abuse or domestic abuse-related deaths. Olivia currently continues to serve her sentence in prison, and she has dedicated her life to the remembrance of her little boy. Madeline has appeared on various talk shows and news segments in an effort to raise awareness about physical abuse, about the negligence of social services, and to employ people to recognize and take swift actions at the first signs of abuse. And that, y'all, was the heart-wrenching story of Olivia Halcrow. And it actually turned into a story I couldn't take about her son, Arthur. Olivia was a once promising student and succumbed to alcohol addiction. And although she might be guilty of taking the life of Gary Cunningham, it's still heartbreaking to know that she'll never get to see her little boy again. And that's it for today's story, guys. I apologize for crying. That really got to me. I should keep it together because this is a professional show, so I do apologize for crying. Let me know what y'all think in the comments below. Don't forget to visit us over at our Patreon, www.patreon.com/Love and Murder. Over there, along with every case that comes out, you get extra information. So you get all the videos, all the audios, all the pictures, everything like that. You also get extra shows, so bonuses. We have a bonus coming out that's about Charles Starkweather. So if you know anything about him, or if you don't, it's a really interesting case. And it's actually a case that inspired Stephen King for some of his books. So you guys want to go over there and check that out. You can actually get in starting at $1 a month. The $1 a month only gets you commercial-free episodes. So you'll get the full length episodes commercial free, and you'll also get the extras like the videos, everything like that. But it does not get you the bonus episodes. So the best tier for you to do is $5 and above, which will get you bonus episodes. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes of Love and Murder. And go ahead and leave us a review. 5 stars if you don't mind. That'll help us greatly. And another way, a free way that will help us greatly, is to just share this episode. Share with your friends, share with your mom, share with your dad, your uncle, share with your true crime friends. And as always, we leave you every night. I'm used to saying we because I started out with a co-host, so don't judge me. We leave you every night by reminding you that it's, say it if you know it, all love and no murder, y'all. Bye.
Thanks again for listening to True Crime by Indie Drop-In Network. If you would like to nominate a true crime podcast to be featured, just send me a tweet at Indie Drop-In. I'd also love to hear if one of our featured podcasts is now your favorite show. Indie Drop-In survives off ad revenue and listener donations. If you would like to contribute, please consider buying me a coffee. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/Indie Drop-In. If you look at the very bottom of the episode description, I put a link in there to make it really easy. Indie Drop-In has many other shows that you also might like. Just go to indiedropin.com. All right, see you next week.